turn this weekend as we switch our attention and start to focus in here on the 4 games. First thing you would say, this is the best weekend of the year, usually, in NFL football, really in any kind of football. You got 4 games. These are divisional teams who won a division. These are good teams. Patriots are a good team. Minnesota's a good team. The Eagles, of course, even with Foles, are pretty good. And obviously, we all know about Pittsburgh. So these are excellent teams for this day and age. I mean, these are not the 66 Packers, but these are 4 good football teams that play this weekend. That is number 1. And normally, I would say, so that usually is one of the reasons why you get good games. Plus, you get a Saturday double dip, you get a Sunday double dip. Now, next weekend, you don't remember one thing about next weekend. You don't get football next weekend until Sunday at 3 o'clock. You got a lot of waiting around before you get a game. That's a lot of dead time next weekend. You're out of work at 5 or 6 o'clock on Friday, and you get football 48 hours later. So you don't have to worry about that this weekend. You got something Saturday and you got something Sunday. And normally, again, this is a wonderful sports NFL weekend and one of the best weekends of the year. I'm not so sure, though, if we're in this situation here this go-around. I mean, I think we all think the Saints and the Vikings will be a pretty good ball game. I don't trust the Saints on the road. I know they had a better road year this year than normal. They won at Carolina, they buried Buffalo and everything else, but they haven't played that great on the road in the second half of the year. They lost at Atlanta, they lost at the Rams, they lost at Tampa. Not as effective, so I'm a little worried about how the Saints are going to come out and had to work awfully hard last week to beat Carolina, and they were fortunate to get around it and doing it. Carolina did have the ball at midfield or late with a chance to win, but let's assume for the time being that the Saints go up there not too battered and bruised. They go up there, they run the ball pretty well. They have had pretty good defense all year, except for recently. They gave up a last-second touchdown to Tampa, and they obviously gave up lots of points last week in big plays to Carolina. But let's say they go up there. So we have one good game. I think everybody seems to think, I heard Steve earlier today say that's the best game of the weekend, and he's right. So let's assume we're okay there. The other 3 games, you had the backup quarterback in one of them, and you have the 2 AFC teams that are playing quarterbacks that, let's face it, I mean, well, not quarterbacks, but teams overall that you wonder a little bit about. You have faith in Bortles at Jacksonville, and then, of course, Tennessee, 9-7, barely got in. Tennessee implodes last week, second half. So I don't know specifically. I'm not exactly sure here how to handle the weekend because the AFC games could be blowouts. As I've said all along, I think you're going to get one good game in the AFC. I think that you will, I think it's going to be Tennessee. I know all things say Pittsburgh and Jacksonville. Le'Veon Bell, a little bit of a distraction with the Steelers, throwing the idea that we know Jacksonville's defense is top notch. So maybe they can keep that game close. Tennessee, did not play that great last week. In the first half specifically, they were fortunate to get out of the game. They had a so-so regular season. New England's New England. Probably a little annoyed that they got a lot of bad press this week regarding the whole scenario with the Belichick, Brady, and Kraft relationships. So maybe New England comes out raring to go and putting a hurting on the Titans. Plus, listen, Kelsey was a big factor in that game last week before he went out with a concussion, and now you're dealing with Gronkowski. So, I mean, you could sit there and think that Tennessee will get bombed, and if they do, you're going to have to pray that Jacksonville comes to play and their offense specifically, because they will not. Pittsburgh's going to score something. I mean, Pittsburgh, if you play good defense tomorrow or Sunday afternoon, if you are Jacksonville, the best defense you can expect to play, Pittsburgh's still going to score in the low 20s. I mean, even if you go out there and do a great job and do everything you can and do your thing, barring horrendous weather, and it sounds like it's going to be cold, but and maybe windy, but barring all that and a mess, you have to figure that Pittsburgh, with a healthy Brown, fresh, they haven't played in a couple of weeks, Bell and everything else, Roethlisberger, bad game the first time the two teams played in Week 5. Roethlisberger had a 37 quarterback rating. You'd have to figure that Pittsburgh is good for somewhere between, at the minimum, between 21 and 24 points. And I'm not too sure if Jacksonville can score that much without help. Maybe Pittsburgh turns it over. That's what happened the first time. And maybe, gives Jacksonville some short fields. But I don't know if Jacksonville with Bortles is good enough to run down the field here and score, 20-something points in this game. So that game could be 24-7. So that would worry me. You just mentioned New England. And then, of course, you got the NFC. We know the Saints should be good. But that first game tomorrow is a very, very hard game to call. You could think Atlanta, they can sort of lull you to sleep. Play good defense, run the ball, not allowing the Eagles to control the game on the clock, and let's see if Foles can make plays. You can go that route if you're Atlanta, or you can go the other route if you want to take Philly and say they're annoyed, they're this, they're that, they're focused, rested, everything else. They're going to stop the Atlanta ground game, whether they're spotty, and they're going to, basically run the Falcons into the ground. A tired Falcon team that has basically pushed everything in the middle of the pile the last 3-4 weeks. They've played very hard. 2 games against the Saints late in the year. Hard game there against the Tampa on a Monday night. Obviously, they had to beat Carolina to make the playoffs. Last week, West Coast trip, now back east, and maybe a worn-out Falcon team. So that game could be ugly or be, not as competitive as we think. And it could go either way. You could say Atlanta because Foles. You could say Philadelphia because of circumstance. Any way you want to go, we don't know how competitive that game is going to be. So I'm a little worried about the quality of the games this week. Last week, the games, he had 2 good games. The Tennessee game, it was compelling because of the ebb and flow to it and what happened in half 2. And the 4th game on Sunday was good. That was a good game. Carolina and Saints. A good football game. Jacksonville and Buffalo was rough on the eyes, and the Atlanta game was terrible. That was not a good ball game by any stretch of the imagination at the Coliseum. Rams are tight and everything else very tight, and the game didn't have any oomph to it. So you had 2 good and 2 not so good. This week, you hope you get yourself some good games. Now, if you go to last year, and I'll look at it right now. If you look at last year's divisional round in the postseason, you had a absolutely stupendous game with the Green Bay-Dallas game, which was obviously late in week number whatever it was. Just a tremendous game. And that Sunday afternoon in the divisional round, Green Bay beating Dallas 34-31. Atlanta-Seattle wasn't very good. That was not a great game. In the AFC, Arizona last year in the divisional round, New England buried Houston, and Pittsburgh, they had to push the game back, if you remember correctly, because of that ice storm. They played the game at night. That was close, but it wasn't that compelling. So you only had the one great game in this round last year. Hopefully you get a couple that keep you moving. You should get a good last game. You need another couple of you definitely take 2 of the other 3 being good. You get 1 stinker, you live with it. But you need to remember, there's no other games to go to. When a game's bad in your time slot, you're sitting there doing jigsaw puzzles. You got nothing else going on. So you need 3 out of the 4 to be competitive. We'll see. I think one of the AFC games in the second half will be competitive. I think the Saints game will be competitive. I don't know. I guess Philadelphia. I don't know where to go in the other game. We continue. We'll get your calls in here on Mad Dog Unleashed.